It's getting hot. 2 p.m. this Monday. Forgot to look at the temperature, but I know the high is 113, so it's probably like 112, 111 right now. Definitely feel it. I just ran this for a few minutes with the compressor running to blow a little cool air on. I mean, cool me off and dry me off. And as soon as I turn that off, it's like all of a sudden I just stepped out into the oven. Oh, blower's starting. Let's take a look or listen. Hey, it's the same first live stream viewer I had earlier. She blows. Same motor, it just doesn't have a rah, rah sound like the other bearings had. Like I said, these are pretty small bearings compared to the 60 horse, motors I do quite often. Building circulator pumps and whatnot. They're just going to be pitted inside, probably from the VFD. All the motors have VFDs. So there's 3 of them here. And the interesting thing is, it's all the same size. I think there's one motor here. It's also a Baldor. I really haven't had to do those yet, but I've had to do on these AAON units for the outside air. I've had to do several of them now. I think all 3 of these units for the outside air I've done the blower, and then this one doesn't run as much, but this belt drive exhaust fan over here, it is the exact same motor as the direct drive blower. This one's belt drive, but it's the exact same motor. There's nothing different. It's an EM3116T, and that's what the other one is. Oh, look, I did bearings on this 2017. Yep, this is one. These bearings actually got noisy before the blower on this one. Most of the other ones, it's been the other way around. So I did bearings on that. Now I'll put a date on this. Put it on there. Like right there. Oh yeah, it sounds totally normal. You can actually hear the frequency of that. And now you guys see why I know a lot of these guys that frequency really picks up with the camera phone a lot. And I put one of these VFDs on my home AC unit and I scroll. I can really hear it through the recording. And it's like, wow, it's like troubling to some people, but to me, it's like a pretty common sound when you work on units like this or going on mechanical rooms with just a wall of variable frequency drives running all the pumps. All your ears, you just hear all that high frequency sound. Now I noticed at home if I change that frequency, the carrier frequency they call it, if I change, you can change it. I think default's like 2 or 2.5 kilohertz. So yeah, it's like if I bumped it up just one setting, I noticed it drastically reduced the audible noise. And the compressor pretty much ran the same. I kept going up. You could go all the way to like 10 kilohertz or whatever, J1000s, maybe even higher than that in the carrier frequency. I noticed when I put it way up, of course it went beyond what you were really hearing, but I noticed when I would stop the compressor and restart it, it would seem to have a little harder time getting some initial braking torque. Maybe you could tune that out of it, but I didn't notice that. I think I'll just change it to, I think it went from like 2 to after 3 or something. I don't know. I know there was a 5 kilohertz setting, but somewhere down in there, I know just moving it up one step in the option list was all it needed to really shut it up. So once I get done kind of doing the work I'm doing at home, cooling just turned on, yes. You can hear that. I got to put this handle on right here, really. You guys hear that compressor? Over me, I guess. This is not so bad. A lot of those bigger units, man, they have a lot of static pressure with the same size panel, but a lot bigger. Like I said, this panel's pretty standard size. Anyway, this panel won't just sit on there and hold by the weight alone. It'll like blow off. gonna stop the video. But yeah, the one thing about the AAONs, they use those scrolls that have the unloader 3-port. When you walk up, you might think that's the suction line because you're just used to seeing like a 3/8 line or whatever, but no, that's hot gas line discharge. Suction is over here, wrapped up. That line right there. Suction, liquid, and then you got diverter valves here. These units can divert proportionally some of the hot gas that would go to the outdoor coil to the reheat coil. Some of you guys have already seen this. The evaporator coil, normal, traditional expansion valve, suction header. But then right here you have the reheat coil. It's after it. So if they need to dehumidify the air a little bit, but the air is cold enough, they need to keep the compressor on. It'll keep the compressor on as the supply temperature might overcool a little bit, but then to prevent that, it'll just start diverting hot gas to that coil over there. Then the liquid comes back here and mixes back in. Because that actually becomes a condenser. It's almost like a subcooler or something, you know. So, works pretty good. But as the duty cycle adjusts, yeah, that's what you hear. I'll run in a few minutes and I'm going to turn it off. Actually, the customer has these disconnects all off right now because it's humid. That's something they decided to start doing when it gets real humid. And if they don't, they should have got an enthalpy wheel option, but they didn't with design. So they're just shutting these units off. So now that another motor's fine. Just abrupt shutdown there. Yeah. I'm trying to see what he said. Even when it was running, I mean, that was still quieter than a Goodman, no? Freaking unloader. So, they have such thick insulation in the construction of these. I mean, all these panels are like boxed sheet metal with foam. They're foam filled. So when I close the door on this thing, you don't hear shit. You know, you're like, what compressor? You barely hear it. Now, Goodman units, I always talk shit about them, but back in the 80s into the early 90s, and every once in a while I'll bring this up, they had a 3-sided condenser coil condenser that had, instead of the 4-sided cube one they went to later, which was a piece of sheet, they used to have 3-sided ones. And the 4th side, it was one long panel that came off like the old Lennox units did. And it's got metal all the way around the compartment. And inside was the compressor and the reversing valve and all the controls, you know. That one always sucks. Into that one compartment. And it did use the notoriously loud Bristol reciprocating compressor like they did all the way into the 2000s before they went strictly to scroll. And those Goodman units were so much better. That was like their best ones. And it was also nice to work on them. You just took one panel off and you had like this cabinet like this, right? And it was all metal. You didn't see under the condenser fan. It didn't let the air from the condenser fan bypass or anything. And you had your Bristol compressor sitting there, and then you had your reversing valve in there, easy to get to, and then you had your control stuff. Yeah, so kind of like opening the panel on a ream. It wasn't L-shaped, it's just one cover, but it wasn't part of the condenser, you know, or whatever. It was all boxed. Lennox did that. And then Lennox high quality ones that were their premium ones, not only do they have the compressor, which was also just recips back in the day, not only was it in that compartment, it was quieter, Lennox also used to put another box like with insulation in it around their compressors. Like when they were doing their early 2 stages, which were like, what they were using. I think they were using the reverse. No, it was 2-speed compressor, had like 6 terminals and 2 contactors or something. They had that funky contactor, I think, that you couldn't, so it wouldn't pull both contactors at the same time. It was like interlocked. Yeah. Man, those were the days, weren't it? Crazy. People used to see those units and go, what the hell? You know, it actually ran at 2 different RPMs, if I'm not mistaken. It was like wound different for the 2 speeds. It was an actual 2-speed motor. If I'm not mistaken. Then one of the brands came up with the twin single, which Carrier was using. It was a 2 pistons, but the crank had a weird cam's lobe or whatever, concentric, whatever they called it. Basically, when it spun one way, it would flip over, and then the lobe would just be in alignment with the shaft, so it wouldn't be pumping. It would just be straight with the shaft. And then when it turned the other way, the lobe would flip, I guess, or whatever, and it would be a crank, like a normal crank, and it would like move the second piston. Yeah. So those were different kind of units they had. Well, back then, they had a little bit of crazy controls, but yeah, I think that was the unit that they had the box. Lennox had a box over that compressor, it had insulated box that just dropped over with a couple screws, and then that was inside the one panel, and then it had a 3-sided condenser coil. Man, I mean, Lennox tried. I mean, Lennox has pissed people off because of all the changes they constantly make, you know. There's a feature breakdown. It's a pressure transducer. Knows what the section pressure is. Let's see. Oh, see, Lennox, yeah, they keep changing their stuff, or they used to. I don't really follow them as much anymore. I don't got a Lennox condenser at my home now. It's pretty basic. But they had the Lennox Pulses in the late 80s into the 90s. Oh, those used to throw people. I had a lot of those up in the Arizona mountains when I worked up in the mountains. Way up yonder before I came down to the desert. I used to trudge through the snow each winter. Fun times. Speaking of fun, it is really freaking hot. The fans is blowing like oven air at me, like a hairdryer. So when you're sweaty, it just kind of you get that's the only effect it gives you. I have that pump mister thing I made, and the freaking mister nozzle plugged. I beat on it, and it's really plugged this time. I keep forgetting to switch it. When I was at home this weekend, I actually have some of that nozzle cleaner. I actually tried it. And it worked at home. Actually, the nozzle, I left some nozzles in a little bottle. And then took them out and screwed them in, and they actually all were clear. Yeah. I don't know what the effects will be of leaving a nozzle in that solution. I've got 1 or 2 that have been in there for like a month now, so I gotta go check them out. If it's okay, I want to bring another little bottle with some of that solution and just keep it next to the nozzle. For my Mr. Pump Sprayer I have down in the truck. Because when that thing works and actually shoots a mist, and I clamp that in the front of that fan, it's like night and day difference. I could totally almost sit up here all day for a whole shift in front of that thing. On a hot ass 110 degree plus day. Speaking of that, I can feel the wave of heat on my hand holding this phone, so you know this thing's just going to trip on me pretty soon. So check the messages one more time. Eli had Joe. Sorry, it's freaking bright, dude. I'm trying to get my eyes to adjust. Joe says, like the Drain Blaster 2000. Dude, those were the days, right? Back when I was doing a lot of residential also. The Drain Blaster 2000. I think I might have finally chucked that thing, but it was hard to throw that thing away. With the ball valve on it and everything. Could have used it yesterday. Sunday? Yeah. Went to church and then out to eat with my friend, and then I went over to his house. I didn't think of doing any video. There's a Sparky friend that came over to help me with the conduit. And I kept trying to tell him the different things he could do for his drain. He says he's getting some drips randomly when it was real humid. It was coming down his ceiling right by the return grill, which was... But I tell him, oh yeah, go out. I go, well, you got shop vac, right? Just go out and hook it up to the outlet out on the coming out the stucco house, and leave it running. Go up in the attic and hear it coming out the vent. So I'll put his hand over the vent, and that suction usually if it's not too plugged, it'll like bust loose the clog in the trap and suck all the way from the unit, but he couldn't find it for the life of him. So I swung by yesterday, and we're walking around his house over. I'm like, what the hell? And then I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, brain fart. I'm like, dude, you got one of those rare houses, which is rare because this house ain't that old, where the freaking builder stuck it to a freaking sink drain. Went to a sink. Sure enough, there it was. So Rob, he pulls the freaking pipe off while I'm telling him to. And it goes boom, and the water all shoots out. It's all nasty. And it was a hair clog that got in the nipple where they tie in the rubber hose to the drain. But I was telling him stories. I go, dude, I used to take this drain blaster up into the attics. And it was like, I would just hit it. I just hook up to the vent if I didn't have the clean out in front of the even if I hooked up to the vent after trap, it didn't matter. It was so violent of a boom. And I had water mixed with nitro. It would like blow the water all directions and blow the clog out. Well, if you didn't realize that that drain didn't go outside, but it went to the person's sink, well, that violent blast would like blow out that sludge out of their freaking trap, blow it out the freaking drain, all over the sink, the mirror, the walls, the ceiling, even the shower curtain. And when the shower curtain's got that cloth outside curtain, oh man, you're screwed. You can't even just wash it off. Oh yeah, I've done that like 2 times to a residence. Both times took me like an hour to clean it. Cleaner and wipes, and then it's embarrassing and it sucked. Yeah. 86, someone's saying in here, I still got my 1986 Lennox Pulse, runs like a champ, but never fails to 2000. Dude, those things, I don't even know if those have been eclipsed in efficiency. They were some of the highest efficiency units they were. It was like, it kind of like went under like pressure and then it cooled off, and as it went out, left out, it would draw in the new charge, and then it would light off the tail end of the previous combustion, and that event happened like, I don't know, 5 times a second or something. You'd get that sound like an idling motorcycle engine. Let's do that again. That's probably sounds gay, but yep. And every once in a while you get the call for the ones that got noisy. You get some mysterious, something happened inside those things and they would like rattle, and those were heavy heat exchangers. They looked like motorcycle heads. Throw the camera off the roof. Well, it's my $1,200 Note 10. So as much as it pisses me off, I refrain from that. I've almost thrown this phone though. Still. Yeah, the days of pacing. That's right, pacing. I was pacing HVAC on HVAC Talk. I don't go on there too much anymore. If I had more time, I would, but I have my time spread. And 4 kids. 3 more later. I had 1 kid, a single dad when I signed up on that thing back in 97 or whatever, 96, 97, whenever my account got started up there. That's how old my pacing HVAC, HVAC Talk account is. And this YouTube is now from 2008, so like 12 years on YouTube. Crazy. Yeah. All right, this thing probably will overheat if I don't go. So, button this up. Catch you guys later.